What happens when the people you pay to protect you decide you're not worth saving? When the legal experts you hired to be your shield look at you and see nothing but a liability. This isn't just a lawyer quitting. This is a legal exorcism. And what they're running from is the client sitting in the defendant's chair. Yesterday, in a federal courtroom, a multi-million-dollar defense strategy didn't just fail, it was abandoned by the very architects who built it. Karen Chandler's high-priced legal team didn't just ask to leave. They filed a motion to withdraw in the middle of trial, turning their backs on their client and walking out into the hallway, leaving her utterly, legally alone. The official court document cites irreconcilable differences. But we have obtained exclusive information that reveals the true, shocking reasons: a financial house of cards that finally collapsed, and a series of lies so profound they made continuing impossible. This is the story of how Karen Chandler became legally radioactive. Welcome to The Breakdown. I'm your host, and this is USA Drama Queen. Picture the scene. The air in that courtroom is thick, not just with tension, but with a palpable sense of unraveling. It's not the usual pre-hearing rustle. There's a sharp, aggressive finality to the way the lead attorney, a man known for $1,500 an hour snaps his briefcase closed. He isn't preparing notes. He isn't whispering strategy to his associate. He is filing a motion to withdraw as counsel. At the defendant's table, Karen Chandler seems to shrink in real time. The woman who has, for years, been described as the strategic force behind the scenes at Roloff Farms, is now frantically whispering to a junior associate who refuses to meet her gaze. The people she hired, the voices meant to speak for her, are literally walking away, their polished shoes echoing on the courtroom floor as they exit. It's a visual metaphor so powerful you couldn't script it, the ultimate professional rejection. The ship isn't just sinking. The captain and the first mate have just jumped into the only lifeboat, leaving the owner behind. But why? Why would a prestigious firm torpedo its own reputation, invite scrutiny from the bar, and walk away from a high-profile case at its most critical juncture? The answer is a two-part disaster. First, the money ran out, and then, far worse, the trust evaporated. Let's start with the money, because in the world of high-stakes federal defense, the retainer is the oxygen. This isn't TV law. This is forensic accounting, expert witnesses, paralegal teams sifting through years of financial records, a war of attrition fought with billable hours. The cost for this kind of defense was already deep into seven figures. For a long time, the assumption was that the funding was secure. The narrative pointed to Matt Roloff, his farm assets, and particularly the secretive CMC Holdings account, a financial reservoir we've exposed previously, believed to be the war chest for this very legal battle. But that reservoir, according to our sources inside the firm's billing department, has gone dry. The real crisis began when the court, as part of its asset freeze in the fraud case, locked down that very CMC account. Overnight, the primary funding pipeline was severed. The law firm, now rightfully concerned, looked directly to their client of record, Karen Chandler. They requested a substantial new retainer payment, a six-figure replenishment to keep the defense machine running. And here's where the first domino fell. Our sources confirm Karen wrote 2 personal checks. She presented them as a stopgap, a show of good faith to keep her legal team in place. But when the firm's finance department processed those checks, they bounced. Both of them. Insufficient funds. In this rarefied legal arena, a bounced check is more than a banking error. It's a screaming red siren. It's a breach of the most fundamental contract, payment for services. It signals financial desperation and operational chaos. For the firm, it posed an immediate ethical and practical dilemma. They cannot be expected to work for free, and continuing to do so could be seen as financing a client's defense, which creates its own set of professional conflicts. The bounced checks were a professional insult, but they were also a clear signal. This client may no longer have the means to see this through. Yet, even a broke client can sometimes retain representation if the case is strong or the cause is compelling. Lawyers have been known to work pro bono for a righteous fight. Which leads us to the second, and absolutely fatal, reason for the walkout. This wasn't just about money. This was about a breach of the sacred covenant between attorney and client. The one unforgivable sin in this relationship: lying to your own counsel. You can tell your lawyer you're guilty. You can tell them every damning detail. That information is protected, and it allows them to build the best possible defense, to anticipate the prosecution's moves, to cut deals. But if you lie to them, you handcuff them. You force them to present a false narrative to the court. You make them unwitting participants in a potential obstruction of justice. You render them ineffective and expose them to professional censure. And according to multiple insiders we've spoken to, Karen Chandler didn't just lie once. She constructed an entire alternative reality for her defense team. Let's talk about the pivotal piece of evidence: the burner phone. You'll remember our exclusive reporting on the discovery of a clandestine mobile device, allegedly linked to the off-book sale of farm assets and communication with shadowy financial entities. During the discovery phase months ago, Karen's legal team confronted her with this evidence. They sat across from her in a secure conference room, placed a photograph of the device on the table, and asked her a direct, simple question: "Is this yours? Have you ever seen or used this phone?" Our sources, who were briefed on that meeting, state that Karen's response was an emphatic, sworn denial. She looked her lead attorney in the eye and stated she had never seen the device before. She labeled it a plant, a fabrication possibly orchestrated by a bitter former associate or a disgruntled employee like Chris Merritt to frame her. She was adamant, she was detailed in her denial, and she was, according to those present, utterly convincing. Based on this direct instruction from their client, the legal team pivoted their entire strategy. They filed aggressive motions to suppress the evidence, claiming it was contaminated and likely planted. They publicly accused the prosecution of overreach and bad faith. They staked their professional credibility on the narrative that their client had no connection to any clandestine communication. Then, the forensic hammer dropped. The prosecution's disclosure wasn't just the phone itself. It was a detailed, technologist's report complete with cell tower triangulation data. This data didn't just suggest the phone was in Karen's general vicinity. It allegedly placed the device's location ping in near-perfect sync with her documented movements over a period of months, travels to specific banks, meetings with specific individuals, even periods at specific properties. Even more damning, sources suggest the report included metadata linking the phone's activation to a credit card under a name that traced back to an alias Karen Chandler had used in previous, unrelated business dealings. This wasn't circumstantial guesswork. This was a digital fingerprint. And it pointed directly at her. The legal team was blindsided. They had been sent into battle with a shield made of tissue paper, based on their own clients' falsehoods. The trust was incinerated in an instant. Every strategy session, every argument crafted, every line of questioning prepared, all of it was now built on a foundation of sand. To continue would have been legal malpractice. They could no longer put Karen on the stand, as they might have planned, without risking her committing perjury based on her own previous lies to them. They could no longer confidently argue against the evidence, because their client had personally invalidated their rebuttal. She had made them look foolish and, worse, complicit in a potential cover-up. The combination of the bounce checks and the catastrophic breach of trust created a perfect storm. The firm faced a client who could not pay and, more critically, could not be trusted to tell the truth. Continuing would risk not only financial loss, but also the firm's license and the individual attorney's standing before the bar. The only move left was the nuclear option, a public, mid-trial withdrawal. They chose professional survival over a doomed defense. But the fallout from this doesn't end in that quiet, stunned courtroom. Karen Chandler is now in a legal purgatory. The judge will have to approve the withdrawal, but that is likely a formality. She will be granted time to find new counsel. But what lawyer in their right mind would now step into this quagmire? Any new attorney will be handed a case in disarray, a mountain of debt from the previous firm that will likely need to be settled before they even begin, and a client with a proven track record of dishonesty. They will be starting from miles behind, with a client the system now views as a proven liability. The prosecution's case, already strong, has just been handed a psychological weapon of mass destruction. They can now argue to the jury that even her own defenders found her so untrustworthy they had to flee. It reframes the entire narrative from innocent until proven guilty to so culpable her allies abandoned her. And this is where the real story is just beginning. Because this legal collapse isn't an isolated event. It's a tremor that reveals the deeper fault lines running through the entire financial and personal empire surrounding Roloff Farms. The bounce checks point to a liquidity crisis far more severe than previously understood. What other obligations are going unpaid? What other assets are stretched thin? The lie about the burner phone suggests a pattern of concealment that goes far beyond what her own team was prepared to handle. What other secrets are still buried, and what other evidence is waiting in the prosecution's file, ready to be deployed now that the primary line of defense has crumbled? Furthermore, the dynamic between Karen and Matt Roloff now enters a terrifying new phase. With the legal bill unpaid and the primary defense strategy in ashes, where does their alliance stand? Is Matt Roloff now expected to finance a brand new, even more expensive legal team for a battle that looks increasingly unwinnable? Or does this public disintegration mark a fracture point, a moment where financial pragmatism overrides personal loyalty? The walls are not just closing in on Karen Chandler legally, they are closing in on her entire support system. And let's talk about the prosecution. They have just been gifted an unimaginable advantage. Their next move will be calculated and brutal. They can now file motions highlighting the withdrawal as evidence of bad faith. They can simplify their case, focusing on the most damning physical and digital evidence, knowing the defense is in chaos and unable to mount a coherent counterargument. The sentencing phase, which once might have involved negotiations for a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation, now looks radically different. Karen Chandler's credibility as a bargaining partner is zero. Her value to the prosecution as a witness against others is now questionable, because who would believe her? She has managed to isolate herself not only from her defenders, but potentially from any path to a deal. This is the ripple effect of a single day in court. A legal team packing up isn't just a change of personnel, it's a seismic event that reshapes the landscape of the entire trial. It sends a message to the judge, to the jury, to the public, and to any potential allies. This case is toxic. This client is beyond the pale. The coming days will be a scramble for survival. Karen will be meeting with court-appointed advisors, perhaps desperately trying to attract a bold or reckless new attorney with a last-ditch strategy. The prosecution will be tightening the noose, preparing to exploit this profound weakness. And Matt Roloff, along with the broader circle, will be making cold, hard calculations about cost, risk, and survival. We are now watching a domino collapse in slow motion. The first domino was the frozen assets. The second was the bounce check. The third was the uncovered lie. The fourth was the walking lawyers. The next dominoes to fall will be the remaining alliances, the final pretrial motions, and the desperate gamble of a defense with no time, no trust, and potentially no money. This story has shifted from a courtroom drama to a study in total systemic failure. The question is no longer about whether Karen Chandler will be found guilty or innocent. The question has become, how complete will the collapse be? And who else will be swept away in the avalanche when the final domino? The gavel echoes, a sharp, wooden crack that does nothing to settle the chaos it's meant to control. The judge has granted the motion. Karen Chandler's legal team is officially gone. They are no longer her counsel of record. They are now just spectators with expensive suits, watching from the gallery if they bother to watch at all. The judge turns to Karen, who is now standing alone at the defendant's table, a solitary figure against the vast, dark wood of the courtroom. Ms. Chandler, you are now proceeding pro se, representing yourself, until you secure new counsel. The court strongly advises you to do so with all due haste. This is a complex federal matter. Trial is adjourned for 48 hours to allow you to make arrangements. 48 hours. 2 days to find a lifeboat in an ocean where every ship has already sailed away. The clock is ticking, and the sound it makes is the sound of a sinking ship taking on water. Welcome back. I'm your host on USA Drama Queen, and we are tracking every minute of this unfolding legal catastrophe. If you think the walkout was the climax, you are mistaken. It was merely the end of the first act. What we are witnessing now is the desperate, scrambling aftermath, a behind-the-scenes panic that reveals the true depth of the crisis. This is the phase where reputations are shredded, alliances are tested in fire, and the real power players make their moves. The facade has crumbled, and we're now seeing the shaky foundation. Hit that like button right now if you're following every twist, and subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The mainstream media will give you the headlines, but we are bringing you the blueprint of the collapse. So, what does a person do when they become legally radioactive? Karen Chandler's first move, according to our sources inside the courthouse, was to retreat to a private conference room, not with advisors, but with her phone. For over an hour, she made call after call. And our contacts, who have seen the call log summaries filed as part of the emergency motion for continuance, paint a picture of pure, unadulterated desperation. She wasn't calling other high-powered white-collar firms.